Hello and thank you for joining us on World Now. I am Abosedi Adeniwadiremi. The summit between United States President Donald Trump and his Russian counterpart Vladimir Putin is scheduled to begin in a few hours and will be held at Joint Military Base, Alaska. Both leaders will be meeting to discuss an end to more than 3 years of war in Ukraine.
The President of the United States, Donald Trump, is en route to Alaska for talks with the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, on the Ukraine war. Ahead of the talks, he says Ukraine has to make its own decision on swapping territories with Russia. This comes ahead of his landmark strategic talks with the Russian President today, which global watchers hope will bring down the high tone of the war for a possible ceasefire deal. Russia has remained stiff in its demand that Ukraine must cede some of its territories claimed during the war to it, with a formal recognition of Russian control over them. This has been a tough one for the Ukrainian leader to chew because he says Ukrainian soldiers and the people fought hard in the war to have their lands back, and his government cannot give them up under any form of manipulation. European leaders have said President Trump should not allow the Russian president manipulate his views by greed on reaching a peace deal. Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is not permitted to be part of the talks, and he has expressed fear that the summit will be one-sided. But he is maintaining that if the Russian president remains stiff, more sanctions should be imposed on the nation. The summit will mark Presidents Trump and Putin's first one-on-one meeting in 6 years. Russia launched its full-scale invasion on Ukraine in 2022. Thousands have been killed on both sides.
For an analysis of the Trump-Putin strategic meeting and other matters surrounding the war between Russia and Ukraine, global affairs analyst Colin Onweke joins us from Belgium. Mr. Onweke, the much-anticipated U.S.-Russia Alaska summit is only hours away. What are your expectations, especially considering heightened tensions in this war?
Thank you, Ambassador, for having me. Well, the expectation is very simple, and for the laymen like us, what we expect at the end of the summit is that there is a ceasefire in Ukraine, at least from the side of those who love to see peace. Of course, for Russia, their primary goal is different. Russia wants to use this, summit to cement continued control over Ukrainian territory, some 20%, and rebound into diplomatic legitimacy without necessarily, making any substantive concessions. Because, no matter how much Russia wants to pretend, Russia has been very much isolated by, the major committees of nations, and they don't like it, no matter how much they want to pretend. And so this summit for Russia is actually, an important step towards, diplomatic legitimacy without necessarily giving up much.
Well, Mr. Onweke, when you talk about the position of Russia in this, there are those who hold the viewpoint that perhaps Ukraine is to blame for the conflict. And, they look at it from the point of view that this war is more of a Russia-NATO war, with Ukraine being used only as a middleman to champion it. Talk about expansion of NATO and that actually contravening existing protocols.
Yes, we have heard that narrative over and over again, but that is basically one side of the story. Now, the reason it is one side of the story, Ambassador, is the fact that there is what they call rule-based international order, where if you believe that you are not being treated fairly, there are ways and means set out, internationally, of which, Russia, as well as Ukraine, are signatories to such conventions. You can address your concerns there. It is completely abnormal for a country to actually take the laws into his own hands and begin to, run over another sovereign nation. And that is exactly what we're dealing with here. And I think it is important that the world, continues to assert the authority to actually say that it is not allowed. I mean, you cannot take 20% of the territory of a sovereign nation, get away with it, and when that happens, at least you are setting a very, very bad, precedent. There are ways to adjudicate this internationally, and Russia should have actually, taken that opportunity.
Let's talk about that Alaska summit. In a post on social media, Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky said, quote, "We are counting on America." How much confidence do you have in the U.S. president to produce results, especially with divided opinions about territorial swaps in Ukraine?
The summit is very, very important to President Trump because obviously he wants to use this as a leverage. He has threatened harsh sanctions, particularly targeting major buyers of Russian oil, such as China, if the summit fails. Now, we also know that, during his electioneering campaign, he had actually promised that he's going to end the war in a matter of days. Well, that is not happening. And so, for him, this is very, very important. And then the diplomatic strategic part of it, we also have to look at the fact that this portrays the Alaska summit as a listening and setting the table exercise. Now, Donald Trump is not under any illusion that, he's going to come out with a deal, in this one summit. But there is the chance he wants to set the table for further talks, which could be anticipated potentially in the presence of Zelensky and European leaders. This is the much that he can, achieve under the circumstances.
Many have said that this should ordinarily, naturally have been a trilateral meeting, but Ukraine's President Volodymyr Zelensky is actually excluded from the high-stakes Alaska meeting. And, now there are questions, and he himself has actually expressed fear that the summit will be one-sided. Do you share his sentiments?
No, I don't share his sentiment. And those who feel that this should have been, a tripartite arrangement, well, that's an option, but it's certainly not the only option. In talks of this nature, there is a need for the table to be set. And so the Alaska summit is actually within the context of, setting the table. President Trump has made it, abundantly clear that there is no way a deal is going to be struck without Zelensky being part of it. So in the second stage or second phase of, this whole process, yes, one can expect Zelensky to be on the table, but the time is just not right for that to happen right now.
Global Affairs Analyst Collins Onweke, thank you for talking to us on World Now.
Always a pleasure. Thank you for having me. And thank you for the Ukrainian color you have on you.
Oh, yes, really. I just realized that. Thank you so much for calling my attention to that.
Coincidence. Fine one for that matter.
Okay.
Cheers.
But it's important to know that